you to the Linux Foundation for offering this platform for a great conversation and being a partner for our upcoming event in DC, which we'll tell you all about. My name is Joshua Kriger. I'm live from Bali, so it is late in the evening, therefore an interesting lighting setup here. But good morning to all of you. I'm the co-founder and co-host of the Edge of Show, as well as the Edge of Company, and we do events globally in the blockchain space with a lot of focus on decentralization. And very excited to be here with my partner for our upcoming event in DC, Gerard Dache, who leads the Government Blockchain Association, and also very much proponents of decentralization in the right context. We'll talk about what that context is and what the current narrative in the overall macro space as well as the US space is in terms of decentralization. And I think fundamentally we're trying to sort of elevate conversations around technology, innovation, and impact with forward thinkers, and we're doing that through our upcoming event and on this platform today. And I'll give Gerard a chance to further elaborate on his background, but he spent years helping policymakers, technologists, business leaders understand how blockchain can modernize governance. And Gerard, we do so much event planning. It's really a pleasure to be here with you to have a deeper conversation for a change.
Yeah, you and I have a chance to do this maybe two or three times, I think, in the last couple of months, and every time it's been joy. First of all, for those of you on the call right now, you're really in for a treat because Josh has an opportunity. He's traveled all over the world, spoken to pretty much everybody in the space. I think everybody in the space knows him, and he's had really great conversations. So, to tell you the truth, I'm really excited to learn about what you've learned, Josh, as you've traveled the world. So, my name, everyone said, is my name is Gerard Dache. I'm the executive director of the Government Blockchain Association. We are an association, a membership group with members in about 500 government offices around the world at the local, state, national, and international level. And our members are pro cryptocurrency, pro digital asset, pro blockchain folks that have requirements and budgets. And they're looking for blockchain solutions that can help them move more towards governance as opposed to government. And we'll talk about that from a decentralization perspective. But super excited to be here. I've been leading the organization since 2017. Josh and I connected, gosh, I think seriously just a couple months ago. And in just a few months, we put together an epic event, which is really a testimony, Josh, to you and your team. So I'm thrilled to be here and glad to be part of this conversation.
Well, thanks, Gerard. And I guess to kick things off, it feels like we should sort of talk about this concept of governance and how it sort of differentiates from uh, government as we know it and where the two actually intersect in the context of decentralization. So, what are your thoughts on that point? Because you have so much experience working with government. I did about, I don't know, 10 years of government consulting as well, and definitely have some thoughts here as well. So, let's start with you.
I think it really all started with the French Revolution and the American Revolution, right? When they look at despotic governments that were highly centralized and controlled, right? And honestly, the U.S. the U.S. Constitution was really, when we talk about government, it was one of the first few times where they said, let's establish rules where the people have the power, taking the power from the centralized authority to the people, to decentralize. The problem is that, as we know, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And mankind has a desire to concentrate power. And so as we move forward into this next sort of generation, right, there's a battle for the soul of blockchain. There are people that want to concentrate that power, and then there's people like Josh and I that want that decentralized, and the folks on this call. So that's a little bit about what there's no reason why governance and decentralization can't be a part of government. The framers of the Constitution actually intended for that to happen.
Yeah, I agree. Back in the day, I worked with Department of Housing and Urban Development on an open government initiative where they, for the first time in history, had a open wiki where they were taking comments from the public about various policies and procedures and really opening up the conversation to everyone feeling that degree of empowerment that democracy is all about, right? But is often sort of done through powerful lobbying firms, through individuals with power and influence, as opposed to everyone having the chance to be involved. And so I guess a follow-up question for you, Gerard, is how does governance actually enable decentralization rather than control it?
I think to tell you the Well, I think it's all about buzzword compliance software, right? So when Bitcoin and the concept of decentralization really started coming out, right? You saw in government, you saw a lot of government contractors saying, "Hey, we got to jump on this bandwagon," and so they conflated distributed ledger technology with blockchain, right? And they tried to pretend that they were doing this, but the reality is we've had DLTs since the 1980s, right? But in their ability to want to have control, they essentially try to essentially confuse, change the language. And so we need to understand that while digital ledger technology is a component of blockchain, what makes blockchain so powerful is the issue of decentralization, right? And so it's really about governments and organizations and companies wanting to use this technology to essentially gain more power. And today, that power is collected in the form of data, right? Data is the new gold, and that's where control comes. I mean, the whole thing kind of unfolds from there.
Yeah, totally feel you in that. And by the way, we have over 50 participants in the room. Thank you all for coming. We definitely want to hear your questions and invite you to participate in this conversation as well. So, if you have a burning question, drop it in the chat and would ask for our host to just, if we're engrossed in conversation, to point those questions out, and we're happy to sort of interact on any of them. Or for those that are just general nature, we'll save those to the end of the conversation and make sure we cover all the questions from this group and thoughts and ideas. So, Gerard, let's shift the attention to sort of the citizen side of the equation. Do you feel that decentralization makes citizens more empowered or more responsible?
Well, both, right? But let's talk. Let's break them into the two different parts, right? The empowerment part really is like this. There are groups today that are very influential. If you look at some of these lobbying groups, they have a ton of money, and that group of citizens is very influential. Decentralization essentially lowers their influence. However, it increases the influence of the common man, right? So what it really is doing is it's rebalancing the power, which essentially we need to do, because one of the ways we've rebalanced power through history is through revolutions. Decentralization is a much better way to rebalance power. With regard to responsibility, a lot of people they don't want to be responsible for their stuff. They'd much rather trust somebody else. I'd rather trust somebody else to take care of my lawn than to do it myself, right? Clearly, I would much rather trust Kathy to cook than I'm a disaster in the kitchen. And so I think that the future that we build has to allow for both. It's got to allow for custody of funds, right? It's got to allow for people that don't trust themselves, and yet we've got to have a situation where people that can trust themselves do that. So it's really got to be both and not one or the other.
And speaking
But
of trust, Gerard, Mike in the chat had an interesting question, something that's been on my mind, and maybe you can shed some light on. If the goal is to reduce government control, Mike said not have, but I think fundamentally reduce it, apply it only when necessary. Why is there so much work being done by the industry to have the government involvement and adoption of cryptocurrency in the Federal Reserve? So I think, there's a reasonable critique here that in our efforts to lobby for pro blockchain policies, we've gotten a little bit overzealous as an industry and tried to create rules of the game that actually are controlling that create an extra layer of governance that may actually not be necessary. What are your thoughts there?
Wow. Well, you know, it there's two sides of the coin, right? Government has a mandated role to protect citizens from bad actors, right? To protect us from a number of ways. Well, to establish some order, but governments can go too far in it, right? So when somebody gets their crypto stolen, they're looking for some kind of recourse, right? When they get, when so we believe that there is a place for government, but where this all comes down to is really the conversation of identity, and I think we'll talk about that here in a little bit, but but yeah, I mean we can't. I believe that no government is anarchy, but we've got to switch from government to governance, which is essentially all about rules based. So, but actually, that leads me to a question for you, Josh. You've talked to people all over the world, right? Uh, specifically on this particular topic. How do you see that issue playing out?
Well, uh, I, I guess, my recent experience here in moderating conversations, in Seoul and Singapore and um, Dubai and Riyadh is that there's more similarities and differences between the traditional finance folks and the DeFi folks than either party maybe realized a few years ago, but I think they realize it now. Essentially, I think in a lot of these context is there can be an underlying regulated government framework that a lot of things happen within, such as how traditional finance works. But the question is, how do we create tentacles to more openness in addition to that? I don't think it's realistic to expect um, governments to fully open the kimono per se and allow DeFi to run rampant. I'm not sure if it's a good thing or not personally. Um, could it self-correct? Could we avoid some of the challenges with, um, you know, um, Luna before and Terra Luna and uh, those types of projects with sort of a more sophisticated DeFi. Sure, but I think when we're talking about collateral, um, it's reasonable for the government to care about where that collateral lives and is it safe? Um, I think that's where the connection, the pipes connect between DeFi and traditional finance and I was at Token 2049. Maybe some of you in the audience were as well. Um, there's a lot of folks like Franklin Templeton in the room now. We have Grayscale coming to our event. And and these folks are building on the tracks that have been laid for them, but they're doing it in more creative and interesting ways. And my eyes have recently been opened up to what happens when you intermix RWAs and yield products for Bitcoin and other sort of big cap cryptocurrencies with traditional market products and services, as well as sort of other asset classes. For example, we're now at a point where there's could be a product, for example, where you're getting a yield on your Bitcoin, which is held in collateral, and then there's a loan that you could buy real estate with, without having to sell your Bitcoin, at all. So, I mean, that's a pretty fascinating world where we're blending, um, what I think is going to be the biggest asset class in the world at some point, cryptocurrency, with traditional assets like real estate, which represents between 50 and 60% of the US economy. So I think these integration points are there. Everyone's in the room. They're all talking. Um, you know, I think the mandate of traditional finance firms, not necessarily all the banks, but the sort of Charles Schwab and Fidelity's of the world is to get the most alpha for their clients at the most conservative basis. And then you have more sort of pioneering folks that are trying to get more alpha. And to do that, you have to look at the cryptocurrency industry because the appreciation of Bitcoin is one of the best performing assets in the history of mankind is civilization is clear at this point.
We do a lot of work in the area of TradFi and DeFi. And the sad truth is that almost all of the financial services pilot projects have failed, right? And we've done a lot of study into why that is, and primarily it's because most people that have built blockchain solutions for finance, they don't understand the requirements. So I'm just going to put a quick plug in. If you want to know about the requirements for building blockchain solutions for bank and financial services, if you go to the GBA, if you search GBA blockchain maturity model, and you look at the documents, there's bank and financial services, you'll see a great roadmap. Joshua, as you've talked to all these folks, at all these different events, are there some real world examples that you can point to of blockchain solutions that really have gone successful in terms of the TradFi versus DeFi space? I know of one which is Tapestry X, right, by L4S Corporation. But do you know of any others?
I think a lot of the ones I'm aware of are in some sort of piloting stage. I think some more advanced than others. I met a company called Paza Labs that has done a regulated bond for real estate privately on chain in sort of the numbers of about $300 million of on-chain bonds. There's RWA companies like Unit Network and Bluebird and that are tokenizing a lot of assets. Constellation Networks, one of our partners at the event, has done some things in this regard where they're mixing, um, you know, traditional finance and DeFi products together with RWA products. So there's not like a perfect example that comes to mind in my mind
Yeah.
at this point. But maybe the audience knows of some examples, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about the one you had in mind.
Well,
I mean, I
sure.
guess
So
Aave. Look at Aave. I mean, yeah,
yeah.
Aave.
So what I've seen from the blockchain solutions that are out there is that blockchains are great for essentially handling bilateral transactions, right? So creating a historical record of bilateral transactions. But what the banking financial services industry needs is they need solutions that can do fractional reserve accounting and future data transactions, right? Third party reporting. The industry is so regulated, right? They've got to be able to do account reconciliation, right? And period performance and tax lot accounting. And the problem is that what we did in banking financial services is we said, uh, okay, here's a blockchain. Let's try to cram it into banking financial services, right? And then every other industry, we said, okay, well, what are the requirements? Now let's build the requirements, right? So if anybody's interested in this topic, happy to reach out to us or go to the GBA page. We'd happy to share tons of research on this. Um, but let's switch over to regulation. So Josh, you meet not only with innovators, right, but you're also meeting with policy people, as am I. So how can regulation really evolve to support this kind of hybrid model? And do you see it as a hybrid model? Do you see it as one or the other? Do you think it evolves? Like, how do these worlds come together? And what do you think governments can do to make it safe without killing innovation?
Well, it's a very sort of tailored situation for each country and the local sort of rules of the game and how policies are set up. I think in more capitalist countries, certainly, uh, I would say, well, let's talk about places like Ukraine and countries that are sort of adopting blockchain at a rapid rate per their population. I think sky's the limit for what they can do because it's a lot less um, complex to create policies and procedures in a more nimble environment than what we have going on in the U.S., where even the stablecoin legislation is sort of now being, you know, sort of held up by the banking associations, right? So I think what governments can do fundamentally is be more open-minded
Yeah.
to the benefits of decentralization for transparency, for openness, for risk mitigation, for actually improved security in many contexts, and sort of looking at those use cases of blockchain to benefit their core mission with more efficiency, faster transaction times, all the benefits of blockchain. So I think it takes advocacy at a grassroots level. I remember one of the most exciting stories we broke last year was the DMV in California put titles, car titles on blockchain. And I know we have folks from, for example, Baltimore that are doing innovative things coming to our event and in other sort of local jurisdictions. So I think like any sort of change, I sort of remember my public policy class in college with fondness. It usually takes use cases and a shock and awe moment. And I think uh, one of those moments was El Salvador and with all the sort of challenges that have come, it sort of was a moment for our industry. I think the bar is higher now, and we need more of those moments. We need more of these examples across the board of real results, and hopefully some of that happens in the U.S. So, there's obviously other countries that will follow suit, but we're seeing progress in Dubai with Vara and what they're doing. Abu Dhabi is doing a lot of interesting things. Hong Kong has a stable coin in the making. In fact, most countries globally are looking at or have created or will soon be creating stable coins. So I think stablecoins provide a nice platform for all these other things because we know that if there's a one-to-one ratio with a digital version of a local currency, and if it's easier to sort of use a peg like the US dollar globally, obviously the US wants to keep the US dollar as a peg. That's some of the complexity with the legislation. There's a lot of interesting things that come about in terms of potential for additional innovation on financial products and services. What are your thoughts, Gerard?
Yeah. So I want to talk about stable. You mentioned stable coins there. So I've used stable coins as a gateway drug, right? So the folks on this call are really concerned about decentralization, right? But if you have a stable coin where essentially you're required to custody U.S. dollars, right, in order to back up the coin, you really don't have decentralization. Again, you've got one entity essentially controlling that. I'm a big proponent eventually of algorithmic stable coins, right? Maybe the technology needs to get there for us to be able to pen it. But once people get used to using stable coins in their transactions, they got their wallets. From there, they can then start moving to more decentralized currencies, right? Like Ethereum and Bitcoin and stuff like that. So I'm not a big fan of stable coins because essentially it's just more centralization. But I am a fan of it as a gateway drug. The second thing that I'll also put a plug in, the blockchain maturity model has a a token supplement. So if people are going to create tokens and they want to be able to prove to the world that their tokens can be trusted, that they have adequate reserves, right, that their distribution model, their tokenomics, all that stuff works, there's free resources on the GBA site to guide them in that. But the third thing about these stable coins is right now it has a huge economic impact. And I don't know that the government is really aware of this because right now our money is really based on debt, right? What happens is the OCC tells the banks, all right, you have to custody, you have to essentially have a 10% reserve or 20% reserve, but you can issue money based on that. But if money starts moving into stable coins, the banks no longer have the ability to create money, and it could potentially crash the economic system here in the U.S. Right? So this people aren't really talking about when cash flow moves into stable coins out of the banking system. That's that's a big problem for the U.S. economy. And hopefully the decentralized currencies will kind of come up. But I see major tectonic shifts in how money and economy works. And you said you think it's going to be one of the largest asset classes. I think I think we're in for a real roller coaster ride, especially as governments try to figure out how do we regulate this, and the rest of the world wants to get off the U.S. dollar, right? I think it's going to be a wild ride. So I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
guess I guess like, that's been the presumption for a while, but I'm a little bit more cautiously optimistic now that the TradFi industry is going to come to terms with the potential and need for DeFi in the same way that music labels had to get comfortable with digital music and Spotify, like it's there. People want it. No one wants a 0.25% yield on their money in the inflationary economy that we're in right now, where essentially you're just losing money every day with that quote interest rate, right? So I think creative solutions to this problem. We've got a housing crisis globally where less people can afford to buy property, so fractionalization of ownership and creative lending strategies come in. I think that in a lot of ways, blockchain cryptocurrency is the antidote to a lot of economic problems that we're suffering. As I've been traveling the world, I am seeing the impact of inflation, whether in Canada or Dubai or South Korea, even Bali. Prices are rising, and it's becoming more and more difficult for everyone to, most citizens to have the means to thrive. And so, I'm hopeful that these solutions come to the top out of necessity and in sort of utility. But in that world, Gerard, like we're dealing with challenges around privacy and accountability. How do you sort of feel decentralized ID frameworks, for example, which could change health records and financial records, can actually be safer than traditional systems?
Well, the real question is safer for who, right? I mean, let's talk about a couple of use cases. In Russia, they're like you just said, they're dealing with inflation. They're dealing with the lack of access to the SWIFT system. So a lot of those people are just trying to do business, and so they've turned to stable coins as an alternative to traditional financial systems. You look at certain women in Iran and some of those countries, right? They're not allowed to do business. So you've got some folks that essentially are trying to hide what they're doing from the government. Now, what the government may be good or despotic, the people might be good or despotic, but when we talk about that issue of safety and anonymity, the government wants to know what these people are doing. The people want to kind of keep what they're doing private or safe. We have seen a couple of really great uses uh, blockchain in identity, and one of them, I don't know if we I don't think we mentioned on this call, but what the United Nations is doing with the Joint Staff Pension Fund, right? They've got a $90 billion fund that they have to distribute funds to people all over the world. They got to make sure that they're still alive, right? And so they have a decentralized identity where the pensioners have their identity on their phone, right? The UN does not collect it, doesn't want it, right? Although they can verify that person is still alive and who they're supposed to be so that they can distribute the money. So that's a great example of using a decentralized identity framework. There's a great company in London called Earth ID, right? And Earth ID is one of the companies that are building out a decentralized identity. In fact, they have been BMM rated at level 1, and they're just a great company. But yeah, I mean, I think the big nut there is the good thing about decentralized identity is I can release certain information to you. Like, for example, am I old enough to buy alcohol? Am I okay to vote in the particular, without giving you the details about my information? And a lot of people really like that because, again, some of these data marts are trying to collect all the identity data that they can, and you've got financial data, most importantly, healthcare data, which healthcare data is the most valuable data on the dark web. People pay a ton of money for health data. So if we can decentralize that, then it really protects people from a lot of just a lot of fraud.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I mentioned Aave earlier. You've got Compound, as well as sort of other products like that. For example, Maple Finance. That was I should have answered your question earlier with Maple Finance. They were on the show and they've done a lot of successful things in that world of sort of decentralized meets TradFi. Um, but Aave has or Compound has 1.8 billion TVL at this point. So pretty impressive impact on the world of financing from those players from the last cycle. So the more creative products I think have a platform here to thrive. There are some questions about GBA, which is I think warranted. It's a really fascinating organization that allows its members to have more direct contact with folks doing business with government and blockchain. I think the government is one of the biggest buyers of products and services globally. So I think it's a relatively untapped market in our industry that Gerard, you and your colleagues were sort of um, adept enough to realize early on. So, what? How can someone become a member of GBA? And are you sort of you have these frameworks? Are you vendor agnostic, solution agnostic at this point? How do you sort of balance um, things while, of course, having uh, companies that for-profit companies join your organization?
Yeah. So let me just do this really quick. I'll just do a quick screen share. So the GBA has members in, like I said, 500 governments around the world: Albania, Argentina, Austria, and the list just goes on and on and on. Um, and at the local, state, national, international level. So these, like I said before, are people that are pro blockchain, pro digital asset, pro cryptocurrency folks. And everybody's got profiles, so there's ways that they communicate with each other. We're organized into about 50 different working groups, and this is where folks in government come and they say, these are the solutions that we're looking for, the problems we're trying to fix. And the private sector says, here's our solutions, here's our white papers, here's our demos. There's a lot to talk about. I don't want to spend this thing talking about the GBA, but if you go to gbaglobal.org and you go to membership, there's a couple different types of memberships. Students are $49 a year. Professional members are $299. And then if you want to join as an organization, those are prices. But the bottom line is we wanted to keep it inexpensive so that we just create an environment where people can connect, communicate, and collaborate. It's all done in a decentralized way. So all the working groups have their own charter. There's a PMO that coordinates everything. There's folks that support their audiovisual calendars, document repositories. But it basically is just a giant network to help people connect, communicate, and collaborate, really to bring blockchain and decentralization into the public sector.
Can you share like one or two examples of specific resources to answer Daniel's question that like resources available, for the GBA members that you're particularly proud of?
Oh, golly, can I ever? Um, the problem is that there's just so many, but I'll just share this one with you guys really quick.
Yeah, let's open up the member portal. Let's see what's in there.
Well, I'm not logged in on this particular computer, but let me just show you this. If you go to the GBA and underneath resources, you go to blockchain maturity model, you'll get to this page. And when you get to this page, again, these are all free resources. What these core documents are describe if you're going to build a blockchain solution that needs to be trusted, right? The BMM solution document lays out the framework. There's 5 levels of maturity. From is it good enough for research and development, due diligent investment? So a lot of investors use this to basically do their due diligence. All the way to level 5, is it mature enough for a global public rollout? But then for every industry, our working groups have created specific supplements, and these are used by governments, right? Before, so for example, in California, they released an RFP. They said it's got to be BMM rated, right? But I'll just so all of these you can download. All this stuff is free on the website. Our goal is that these should just be used to help folks. But we talked about banking, financial services. This is just the first one. There's a bunch, but what we've done is we said, look, if you're going to build a blockchain solution for banking financial services that's going to be trusted, you first clearly have to define what the use case is, right? Value transfer business, individual banking, private banking, community banking, right? Credit cards, CBDCs, capital markets, right? Structured products, exchange traded derivatives. And we run this for years. One of the top lines in banking blockchain is we then identify what are the attributes of that solution, right, that need to be in place for a traditional banking for traditional banking to be able to trust it, for it to be able to deploy it in a regulated environment that's trusted. So this is, and again, future data transactions, right? These are some of the things I mentioned before. These are some of the things that we've learned that if you're going to deploy a decentralized solution in a regulated environment, these are the requirements that you have to meet. So we've done the same thing in voting in elections and healthcare, right? Tokens, right? These are all, and we're working on a whole bunch more, including artificial intelligence, quantum. Uh, it's a vast network of people that are trying to help the public sector recognize you can actually buy and use decentralized solutions, but the people in the decentralized world have to understand what those requirements are because we just build stuff and then we want to sell it to government, and that's why it hasn't worked, right? So we got to go backwards, and we got to say, hey, what are the requirements, and now let's build solutions for those requirements. So
That's a lot of good materials there to keep everyone here busy for a while. And shout out to, I mean, Linux Foundation for all the work they're doing to you know, build and maintain an open source community that's open and transparent. And I learned about your mission specifically by meeting Karen at another blockchain event. So Karen, so honored to partner with you guys again. And I don't know if you're multitasking or hearing this. I'm curious if you have any additional insights or thoughts on the conversation we've been having today.
Hi, yeah. Let me just turn on my video. Hi, yeah. It's great to have you all here in our community. I've been enjoying listening to the conversation. And I think looking forward to the upcoming event that you have. I think what's what we see, with a lot of the announcement that came out of Cybos, Swift launching their own network for banks, that there's going to be just a lot more of a focus on really designing for purpose for regulation so that all the institutional players can really get involved, whether it's government or regulated institutions. So I think the conversation you all are having is very relevant to that momentum that I think we see in the market.
And are you concerned about sort of the our industry over lobbying government to be more prescriptive than necessary?
Um, I don't know if I really have an opinion on the level of lobbying. I think people who want to make things happen will do that. I can't really comment on whether or
I
not
guess
it's too
it's
much.
I guess it's more about are you concerned about the result of this sort of engagement with government resulting in sort of policy and procedures that are overly prescriptive? Or is like my feeling on it is whatever happens is light years ahead of where we were. So we're gonna make some mistakes and think the dials and the knobs will change over time.
Can
Yeah,
I throw, when
yeah,
Carrie's
I
gone, I
don't
want to throw
think
something on there.
yeah, if anything, I think it's actually working to make things I think like educating legislators is helpful to the market to get so that these things can actually work in a way that make the use cases we're trying to build possible. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I can comment on whether or not it's going to be too prescriptive. That's not really my area of focus, but I think the engagement that there has been in general with this community is a positive thing.
Right on. Gerard, you were going to share something?
Sure. So Karen and I had the great pleasure of being at an event at the United Nations about a week or two ago, and I don't want to disclose exactly who or what, but we were listening to a good friend of ours talk about the blockchain solution that the UN had built, and that person is today meeting with Joseph Lubin, right? Because that solution is a permissioned blockchain, right? And Joseph Lubin is trying to encourage him to write that data to a public blockchain, saying, hey, there would be much more transparency if this occurred. And so what we're seeing in government right now, and this is on a use case by use case basis, is that government regulations essentially require certain things. Like, so for example, in the UN has to have their stuff in a data center that the UN controls because that data cannot be under the regulatory authority of another nation, right? The United Nations is all of their data has to be in UN sovereign data. But if you're looking at things like elections, right? There have been some blockchain elections. The regulation says that the election data, cannot leave the state or the county. So how do you have a decentralized solution in places where the regulation is saying it must be geofenced or geolocated? So what a lot of decentralized solutions are doing now is they're coming up with solutions that can be geofenced, right? And so what I really think that we need to do is rather than uh, kind of getting into these wars that it's got to be all or nothing, we've got to work with government to find out, okay, well, what are the regulations and how can we build decentralized solutions that still fit within the regulatory framework, right? And allow us to move forward. So it really is. And Josh, I learned this from you. I had a chance to watch Josh negotiate in a couple examples, and he's a master at finding out what is it, what are your constraints, right? What are your drivers, and let's find a win-win. And that's what we've got to do with regulators is we've got to find that win-win with them. So I just wanted to tag that on to that question.
Right on. Um, well, if anyone else has any questions, drop them in the chat. Meanwhile, just we'll
Or
put a
come off
poll.
of mute,
What's that?
or people can come off mute and ask the questions as
Yeah,
well.
Yeah,
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 I
come
really
on.
like
feel
conversation, and
feel
that's
free.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Feel
Yeah,
free
no,
to.
this is
It's
a
a meeting and it's an open
nice.
forum.
Yeah, I love that. So, yeah, don't be shy. Um, meanwhile, as
If you
folks,
ask any hard questions, ask that to Joshua. Okay, just keep the easy ones for me.
yeah, I like to ask the questions actually. But
I, Josh, one more thing. We did want to talk about a couple of use cases, and you had mentioned that you thought the casino use case was pretty interesting. You want me to share that one real quick?
yeah, go for it. And then let's wrap up by talking a little bit about our upcoming event and what folks can expect there and how they can be involved.
Perfect. So a great example of how decentralization was used in a regulatory environment was actually in the casino and gaming industry, right? So the largest sources of money laundering in the world is art and casinos, land-based casino systems. So this one company out of I think they're headquartered out of Los Angeles, maybe out of Canada. They service, I don't know, 80-90% of the land-based casino systems in the world. So the bottom line is that they came up with a solution that every time somebody pulls a handle on a slot machine, it writes a transaction to the Ethereum blockchain, right? And this way, the regulators, when they get their compliance reports, they can check any transaction against the blockchain to find out if the casino operator essentially is lying, right? And what that has done is, for the regulatory authority, it has really minimized the amount of time and effort they have to spend doing these audits, because they can now essentially even automate the audits, right? And for the casino operators, it takes down all of that burden from all the audits that they have to do with the regulators. So both sides are happy, because the casino operators that can be trusted, they're all good. The ones that can't be trusted don't do it, and that's where the regulators are essentially focusing their attention. So
Do
from
you
a
know what?
business model, yeah,
Yeah, Gerard, really interesting examples. Sunil was asking what platform it's on. Is it on Solana or another L1?
no, it's on Ethereum.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah, and as I recall, they do some kind of roll ups. I don't remember the detail. We did that assessment, and the other example that has really worked great is voting in elections. So Votes, VOATZ, another BMM rated company, they've done national elections in the U.S. And all over the world. They've done primaries and all kinds of stuff, but they've been very, very successful at really bringing integrity to elections. So those are just a couple examples of public sector blockchain solutions. We're working on a report right now called "Using Blockchain to Reduce Government Fraud, Waste, and Abuse," and that report will be announcing that at the event in October, which is a great segue. Josh, why don't you tell them a little bit about the event October 30th?
Yeah, and there's a couple more questions we can wrap up with as well. So you all are welcome and invited to join us in DC. We can't publicly share this, but privately we can share that our event will be at the U.S. Capitol. And of course, we are in the midst of a shutdown. However, we have contingency plans, but are optimistic that that shutdown will be resolved. So, if you go to the GBA website, you're actually able to register for the daytime event, which is free of charge by approval. Just simply in your comments note that you are part of this conversation and you'd like to attend, and by all means, we welcome you to the forum. It's from 9 to 5:30 p.m. with some keynotes as well as some panels with some very notable individuals from Congress, from enterprise, from Web3. Excited about Yatsu's perspective. I got a sneak peek of it. I moderated a panel with him in Singapore about what he thinks is the number one best use case for tokenization in the world, and I'll just tell you right now, and you can learn more about it. It's private equity. It's basically tokenizing equity in all companies. Uh, a company, a group of folks tokenized a portion of Animoca's stock without his permission. They gave him a heads up, but they you don't have to get permission to do it. So think about what that means for tokenization. It's pretty exciting. Um, but we also have a Roaring 20 style gala the night before, which is going to be from 7 to 10 p.m. at St. Gregory, which is a really special hotel, not too far, 15 minutes from the Capitol. And if you're interested in going to that, you can use the code Linux VIP, Linux VIP, to get a discount on attending the gala, which will be more networking, definitely some uh, more sort of casual time with the speakers that will be at the event the following day. I'm sure we'll have some VIPs drop in that you'll get a chance to meet, and we'll be playing a game called Cryptopoly, which last year there were over $14,000 in prizes. So that gala ticket may actually turn into a lottery ticket if you play your cards right. But we'll have some nice food, great ambiance, and there'll be an award ceremony for the GBA Awards, the Annual Achievement Awards, with six of the top leaders in the blockchain industry announced through an open voting, decentralized voting platform, actually, where not only GBA members, but the whole world can vote on who should win. And Gerard, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that component. Gerard, you're on mute, sir. There won't be an online there won't be an online attendance option, Kenneth, but we will be taping everything and planning to release it on the Edge of YouTube channel, which is you can look up the Edge of show on YouTube. And then the GBA also has a YouTube channel that will release it on. So you'll be able to catch sort of the highlights in time, but yeah, you got to be in DC to get it live, to get that experience. So we're really excited about that. Gerard, can you talk about the Annual Achievement Awards briefly?
Sure. So I think we've been doing now for 5 years. It's a very prestigious award. We take nominations from all over the world. Uh, Anybody can vote. They have to register to vote. So we've got about 5,000 blockchain professionals that essentially voted this year, and the award winners have ranged from President Bukele of El Salvador, different congressional people, all the way to students that are working on stuff. So it's all. In fact, one year the guy who won leadership actually beat out Cynthia Loomis, because what this guy did is he traveled all around the Middle East identifying leaders to build stuff and created a community. And people thought that what he did was, even more impressive than what Cynthia Loomis has done. So it's not. It's you can't buy it, right? People are, you don't have to be GBAs to be nominated. But what we wanted, and every year, what we do is we promote the past winners. So once you're a winner on this award, you're promoted every year as one of the leaders in the industry. It's a pretty phenomenal thing, and the voting is all on blockchain, fully transparent. We want to model basically decentralization, decentralized selection of awardees. So that's it.
Cool. Does anyone have any questions about the event? I'm curious, who's not been to DC but is looking for an excuse to go? You should check it out. I lived there for many years. Gerard lives there. Um, if you're coming, it's not a bad place to hang out for Halloween weekend. There's over like 20 free museums, some of the best in the US. So good chance to be on the front lines and enjoy a really cool city. It's got quite a food scene too.
Oh,
Um,
look, I got to tell you, listen, if you're coming, right, the reception is on the evening of the 29th. By all means, you should get a ticket and come. It is just it's so fun. The women will be wearing flapper dresses, the guys will be wearing top hats. It's a great networking thing because, sometimes people are a little uncomfortable going up to strangers, but here you go up and say, hey, I got a red card, you have blue cards, let's trade. The next thing you know, people are swapping business cards, and it's lots of little comfortable places for people really to talk business, but it's done in an environment that's very fun. Great place to bring your spouse, so you don't have to be in the blockchain space to have a lot of fun. The food is phenomenal. It's just a great food. But if you're coming for the 29th, you should come in earlier during the day and take a tour of the Capitol, because we're hoping slash planning that it's open. If it's not, we still have contingencies. But getting an opportunity to come to Washington, D.C., go to the Capitol Visitor Center, and just going in there and seeing all the history, and to see the sort of the center of power, and the values. Honestly, it would be an experience that you will remember for the rest of your life. And then the next day, being in the Congressional Auditorium, as we're talking about all these innovations that go in the future, and really changing the world with people that are actually changing the world. It's an experience that you don't want to miss it. there will not likely be an event like this in a long, long time. So you definitely don't want to miss this thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm really excited to do this with GBA this year. EdgeUp has done a lot of events in the past, I think over 35 globally. We're known for NFTLA. We still love NFTs. I think in a lot of ways, RWAs are the new NFTs. And the word NFT just was like plagued from its very beginning, but they're still around, and it sort of relates to a question Andres asked about social impact. So I have to look up, but at NFTLA, there was a coalition for social justice for prisoners that was looking at sort of an NFT concept to allow prisoners to sort of create value digitally that they could then redeem after they get out of prison. But I did find some other examples. For you from my favorite AI resource, Perplexity. I'm not sure if everyone uses Perplexity, but it uses a lot of recent internet data in a creative way. And there was one more question, Gerard, that I don't have. Well, I don't. I cheated. I got some ideas from Perplexity, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on the issue of age verification for governments, recognizing, with birth and records, death records, these are all sort of very centralized, complex systems. Um, you know, you're dealing with local laws, the European Union laws. It's all very complicated around citizenship and whatnot, age verification. Do you think there's a chance to sort of move that ball forward over the next coming years?
Well, it's already being moved. So Utah County, as an example, they have a solution where they actually have marriage licenses on a blockchain. And what drove that was during COVID, they shut down all of the marriage offices, so people couldn't get married, right? So they decide because when people needed a copy of their marriage certificate, they couldn't go to the office to get that. So that's the first example. But really, the concept of decentralized identity, like um, uh, I should control who I release that information to. And that's what that's all about. And then there's a whole other issue of monetization, right? That information about you, right, is a multi-billion, maybe multi-trillion dollar industry, right? And if that data is essentially going to be used by somebody, then there's a big movement to say that you should be compensated for that data. Who's Henrietta Lacks? I don't know if you know the story of Henrietta Lacks, but she was an African American woman. I think maybe the 1950s, 1960s. She had a very unique genetic property, and her cells were used for I think it's cancer research for decades. And at some point, the family found out that her cells were used, and there was a court case, and I believe that they were finally compensated for the use of her cells. So identity, age is just one aspect, but healthcare data is a huge aspect, and absolutely this stuff is going to move because there's such a need for it, right? In clinical trials, there's a need for it. There's in all sorts of research, there's a need for it. So absolutely, and I think this is going to be one of the things that really revolutionizes the advancements in so many fields. So
Well, I think that's a great sort of point to end on. I appreciate um, over 60% of you staying with us for the full duration of this event. My podcast gets about 65% watch through rate. So I consider anything in that range a success. I know everyone's busy, has a lot going on. I hope you all got some insights from this conversation. Thank you again to Linux Foundation for what you're doing. Karen, great to have run into you, and been able to do this collaboration together. Hopefully, many more to come. And wish you all a great day and hope to see many of you in Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, you can learn more about GBA on their website, GBA Global. And then my company is the edgeof.xyz, the edgeofshow dot com. Yeah, .com. And then outeredge.live is our event space. We have a newsletter as well that over 35,000 people get with an open rate in the 30 to 40%. So hopefully the content is meaningful for folks that want to know about upcoming events, hot topics in the news, which we cover on our show every Friday. And then we have some deep dives with some of the leaders of our industry. So I encourage you to check out the Edge of Show as well. Thank you all and have a
And
great.
real quick, I put the Luma links if you're interested in registering for the event. I'll drop them in one last time, so they're at the bottom. And so feel free to hit those links and register for the event. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, S.